Greetings. My name is Anthony Brown, and this is Psychology 512, Social Psychology, Group 2, Week 3. Social psychology has been defined as a scientific study focusing on the thought process, feelings, and behaviors in a social setting. The specifications assist us in understanding what a person feels, their actions, and their thoughts. This presentation will cover relative deprivation, social identity, social categorization, self comparison, self esteem, stereotypes, and sexism. Relative deprivation, an idea coined by sociologist Samuel Stouffer, is the belief that people can acquire a sense of deprivation or entitlement by comparing themselves to others. This study assists us in understanding how people's subjective comparison influence their outlooks when they are confronted with a certain situation. It is often suggested that people who feel deprived will join social movements. Some very popular examples would be the gay rights movement or equal rights amendment. Both of these historical moments came to light when people felt deprived of something others already possessed. Supporters such as Pettigrew, who used the theory to study urban violence, Kaplan, who explained why affluent people are likely to be the leaders of social protest movements, Blackman and Campbell, who used the theory to clarify why personal happiness sometimes rises during economic downturns, and Cook, Crosby, and Hannigan, who utilized the theory to explain why people try to match the consumption of others who are economically more prosperous. Many theories from social sciences relate to the relative deprivation theory. For example, the frustration-aggression theory assumes that there is a positive association between anger and an individual's desire for thoughts on the feasibility of attaining and difficulty in attaining a desired object. The justice theory states that people need to believe that the world is just a place. The theory of hedonic relativism believes low expectations breed satisfaction. Davies' J-curve theory of revolution studied racial riots and concluded that anger is more than likely to occur in people lacking something if they both want and previously had it. However, social comparison theories produce several other theories and ideas such as theory of distributive justice and equity theory. Along with relating to the theory, many theorists influenced the development of relative deprivation as a premise. Theorists such as Davis, Gert, and Williams were among those influenced. In 1976, Crosby believed that allocation of blame is relevant to the experience of deprivation. In this model, Crosby states that 5 preconditions must be fulfilled in order for a person to experience relative deprivation. Those 5 preconditions are: see what others possess, want it, feel that they deserve it, think it is feasible to obtain, lack a sense of responsibility for failure to possess what they want. During the process of using these theories, some researchers found that the idea of deprivation was useful while others measured feelings of deprivation to produce such feelings. Social comparison has been defined as people's desire to know themselves. For example, when an athlete competes, they compare themselves to their competitor. Social comparison happens very naturally. These comparisons often affect our motivation, feelings, and self-esteem. Self-categorization has been defined as cognitive self-placing in a collective category. It seeks to understand and explain the processes by which people form cognitive representations of themselves and others in relation to different social groups. People define themselves differently in different situations. For example, you may react differently to a news story about the criminal behavior of a child if you were a parent instead of a police officer. Social identity makes mention of the ways that people's self-concepts are based on their membership in social groups. Some examples would be religion, sexual orientation, or ethnic groups. In society, we often categorize people before knowing them, whether it's by gender, race, or age. According to Casson, social categorization allows us to form impressions quickly and use experience to guide new interactions. It indicates that a given individual perceives his or her group and his or her membership. It occurs when we think of someone versus their opposite, such as man versus woman, an old person versus a young person, or a man versus a woman. An even broader example would be when you meet a professor. You may classify him or her as a woman or man, middle-aged, African American, and so on. This is a natural part of social perception. It allows us to infer things about a person based on their properties of others in the same category, although our conclusion may be wrong. According to Casson, stereotypes are beliefs that link whole groups of people with certain traits or characteristics. For example, women aren't as smart as men. This has been seen in society by women having more credentials but still aren't seen as leaders. A great example of this would be Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. According to Casson, prejudice consists of negative feelings about others because of their connection to a social group. An example would be people being born outside of the U.S. Although people holding this prejudice attitude do not know all people who weren't born in the U.S., they dislike them because of their status as foreigners. Discrimination is negative feelings towards somebody because of their affiliation to a certain group. An example of this could be wage discrimination. An employer offers a lower wage for women doing similar work as a man in the same field. In Bashir's study, he discusses the stereotypes of activists such as feminists. He felt that people associate negative connotations about the group. The stereotypes weaken the possibility of people to affiliate with a group or to adopt the behaviors the activists showed. This study examines specific groups to show that stereotypes overlap considerably and have similar implications for resistance to social change. The results showed that stereotypes and person perception processes more generally play a key role in creating resistance to social change. This can be easily related to sexism. According to Casson, sexism is prejudice and discrimination based on a person's gender. The article speaks of feminist activists receiving a stereotype because of what their preferences are. The study of sexism has suggested that the solution to gender inequity is changing sexist culture and institutions. The feminist movement fought for the end of sexism and beginning of women's rights as equal under the law. In Shepard's social identity and self-esteem study, Shepard insisted music playing as a vital role in social identity. He expected there to be a relationship between music and self-esteem. Social identity is a person's sense of who they are based on their group membership. It can be related to a them versus us mindset. Social identity occurs when we think of someone versus their opposite, such as man versus woman and race versus race. In this study, the purpose was to further examine the association between the music preference and the self-esteem and to apply social identity theory to differences in music preferences and self-esteem. Self-esteem is the confidence that a person has in their self, whether it be physical or mental. High self-esteem is being able to accept your strengths and weaknesses, while low self-esteem is believing that others are better than you. The results of this study show support and challenges for social identity theory. Gender was a constant problem with Shepard, stating that moderating effect of gender should be estimated when reporting music preferences data. Conclusion. Social interception plays a very pivotal role in everyday life. It relates to the beliefs people have about themselves, whether they be negative or positive. Social interception has the power to lift a person up or ultimately bring them down. Discussion questions. According to Chatty's text, the social comparison theory is a broad explanatory theory of behavior, out of which specialized theories have risen to explain different facets of comparative behavior. Have you ever unknowingly compared yourself to another person? How did it affect your thinking process? Also, how did this relate to the Bible and its perspective on comparing yourself to others? Secondly, in Casson's text, we see that he discusses gender stereotypes. In society, people are used to believing they know what men and women should be like instead of what they are like. What is your take on gender stereotypes? Do you think the Bible supports gender stereotypes or undermines it?